Number 4, business case. Like the majority of the documentations, most of the documentations are produced during the bid phase before the appointment of a project manager. So a formal business case, a full and sort of traditional business case will be produced on that sort of level, on a senior level, and that will be translated into a document called the CCN, a change control note, because everything contained within one particular contract is sort of considered a bigger project, and sub-projects within that are considered different activities that are changes to that initial contract that CGI has with the client, in this case the Ministry of Justice. So CCNs are sort of like mini versions of the business case, and they contained a majority of the things that you would expect in a business case, but they're much more sort of tailored to CGI's way of business and much more tailored to the information that project managers need and the project team needs, and it takes out any unnecessary bits. For example, there'll be strategic case. There will be a strategic case. There will be a background on how the situation came about, what needs to be done to it. There will be, in terms of options appraisal, we won't have many different options because the contract already determines what the work needs to be done. Because the contract already determines the work that needs to be done. So it's just a matter of managing that particular choice and making sure that we as project managers see that to fruition. So options appraisal is something that's not included because it's not really a choice of exploring alternatives at this point. At this point, we just need to complete this task and produce a piece of software, a piece of application, or whatever it is that we are producing for the client. The expected benefits, again, they're contained on a sort of a higher level, and they're communicated to the client before the start of the individual projects within the particular contract, but there are going to be references of benefits within the CCN that are sort of business orientated or project orientated, and any differences from the sort of overarching document will be highlighted and they will be specified within the CCN. Commercial aspects, just like you would expect in a traditional business case, the CCN will have a breakdown of all the various sort of costs, estimations, time and materials, how the project will be billed, how it will be charged, charge rates, things like that, things of that nature. Risks, any risks that are specific to the project are highlighted. A full risk assessment is done prior to the appointment of a project manager, and the risks of each of the various different options are also evaluated before the appointment of a project manager for a project within CGI. Timescales, the business case, the CCN also has timescales, just like you would expect in a normal business case, and it has expected timescales and expected activities to meet, expected sort of milestones, forecasted milestones, forecasted KPIs, things of that nature. I contributed to updating the business case, in this case the CCN, as we went along and as we developed a little bit further in the early stages of the project, and this can be seen from the evidences section. So after sort of developing a business case for the project, after contributing to the development of the sort of mini business case for the project in question, I went and combined that with the sort of stakeholder management plan, stakeholder analysis, communication management plan, all of those sort of things to highlight the roles and responsibilities of the team members, of the stakeholders that were involved, and that was again communicated back to the stakeholders to make sure that everybody was happy with that, and everybody knew what they were doing to ensure the project was on track, and to ensure that there weren't any conflicts that would occur, or there weren't any risks posed to the project by the stakeholders involved. We consulted with the client and we consulted with the business to produce a structure, and I produced an organizational breakdown structure from those sort of consultations. I developed that further. I developed the OBS further and combined it with a work breakdown structure and produced a sort of roles and responsibilities matrix from the information that was given to me and from the agreements in place with the various different stakeholders and the consultation with the clients and the business. I also developed an information management plan, and that allowed me to clearly define how the information was collected, how it was received, how it was transmitted, and when it came to the end of life of that particular piece of information, what would happen to it then, how it was stored within the business, and also I considered the various different policies that CGI had in terms of sort of data protection, data collection, and archiving different project data. I also highlighted in the evidence section some of the sort of legal requirements and the policies that are made within CGI based off of the legal requirements in terms of information management and data protection and all of that stuff. One of the legal requirements is confidentiality and data protection. So one of the best examples of that is the fact that I've blurred out any sensitive, any confidential information from the evidences to make sure that we comply as an organization, and I comply as a project manager to the legal requirements that I imposed on the business. We use different methods such as sort of Gantt charts, the reports that are produced, burn down charts, to track and monitor and track and monitor the progress of the project, and if there are deviations from the plan, it's quite evident when we're using different sort of charts. It's quite visually quite evident that something's gone wrong and something needs to be done there. We also use something called PRT, Project Reporting Tool, which is sort of a comprehensive tool that reports to the business on the progress of the project, and it does it from resources point of view, financial point of view, which are sort of the two sort of most important and key pieces of information that the business needs to know. I'll touch on that a little bit later when we talk about finances. If there is a deviation from the plan, then there are some tolerances that we have as project managers. The sort of general guideline for the project that I was working on was sort of 10 working hours or 10 hours worth of effort. If it wasn't costing any extra materials, if a task needed done that was less than 10 hours worth of effort, then the project manager had the authority to just sort of steer, take sort of corrective action to steer the project right back on track. If something exceeded 10 hours worth of effort, then that had to be reported back to the business, and the business would have decided what they want to do with it. The program managers would have advised, or consultants would have stepped in and advised corrective action for that, or it might be the case that the project is no longer viable and the project then needs to come to an end at that point. If there are points where, if there are deviations outside of the tolerances, as I said, it gets relayed back to the business, and then the business decides what happens to that. And for that, we have escalation procedures within CGI, and normally it is just an email to the program manager saying that this is what's happened, and we flag that as a high importance email. It gets picked up by one of the program managers, and then they decide what course of action they want to take, and they advise the project manager on what sort of corrective action to take, or what sort of discussions to have with the various stakeholders involved.